Hi, everyone. Welcome to this information video on how to file a human rights complaint. Thank you to AC Friends of the Court for inviting me to present this video to you all. I hope it will be helpful. My name is Laura Track. I'm a human rights lawyer with the Human Rights Clinic at CLASS. CLASS is the Community Legal Assistance Society. We're a nonprofit legal organization based in Vancouver, and the Human Rights Clinic at CLASS provides free legal services to folks in human rights. We're a province-wide organization, so even though we're physically located in Vancouver, we do our best to provide service to folks no matter where they are in BC. And we have a range of different services, including an information line, which is available Monday to Friday, a short service clinic that we run every Monday where anyone can sign up for a half an hour of legal information and advice about a human rights issue. And then we also provide representation for people going through the human rights complaint process. After you have filed a human rights complaint and had it accepted for filing by the tribunal, you can apply to our clinic for legal representation, and we'll do our best to match you up with a lawyer or an advocate who can help. You're at an earlier stage than that right now. You're just thinking about filing a human rights complaint. And so that's what this video is intended to help try to explain. So where to start? You file your human rights complaint with the BC Human Rights Tribunal. The tribunal is like the court that deals with human rights complaints. They hear evidence and make decisions about whether discrimination that's contrary to the Human Rights Code has occurred. So that's the website for the Human Rights Tribunal there, bchrt.bc.ca. And you'll see when you go to that site, guidance for where to go to find the correct form to make the complaint. This is a screenshot of that page, and it tells you that there are two ways to file a complaint. You can either fill the complaint out online. So this is quite new at the Human Rights Tribunal. They've developed a sort of online portal where you can make your complaint directly on the site, or sort of on a affiliated site, a portal site. You can also download the form, print it out, and fill it out by hand. Those are two options. And the tribunal also invites you to contact them if you need some other option for filing the complaint. Maybe you can't download and print the form and you need them to send you a copy. They will do that for you. Most complaints are individual complaints, and so you would use what's called the form 1.1 to make your complaint. Someone can bring a complaint on behalf of another individual. Often we see parents bringing complaints on behalf of their kids. It's also possible for an adult to bring a complaint on behalf of another adult with their permission, or if they don't have capacity to consent. That could be another option as well, where somebody brings a complaint on someone else's behalf. And there is a second form that you need to fill out if you're going to be representing someone in that way. So that's how most complaints proceed, is as individual complaints, but it is also possible to bring complaints as a group. So a couple of people who've all experienced the same kind of discrimination in the same context. Maybe they're all being sexually harassed by the boss at work. They might decide to bring their human rights complaint together as a group. Class complaints are also possible. That's a bit different than a group complaint in that the class is a group of people that are all defined by a certain characteristic. So a group of visually impaired people in Vancouver might bring a complaint on behalf of that entire class of people, all visually impaired people in Vancouver, and they might complain about a problem with transit, for example. So that's who can be a complainant. Who is the respondent? This is who the complaint is against. This is the next thing that you have to answer, the next question that you have to answer on the complaint form. You have to say who the complaint is against. And in most cases, the respondent is the business, the organization, the institution where the discrimination took place. If your complaint relates to discrimination in your job, you always want to make sure you name your employer, the company that you work for, because they are ultimately responsible for the discrimination. Sometimes it's also appropriate to name an individual as a respondent. It's appropriate to name an individual as a respondent when they are particularly responsible for the discriminatory conduct. If they were the directing mind of what happened or personally responsible for the treatment. The classic example of when an individual is liable for discrimination is in harassment type situations. If you're being sexually harassed or racially harassed or subjected to homophobic bullying on the job, you might name the individual who's responsible for that behavior. However, if your complaint just relates to, not just, but if your complaint relates to something that happened in the course of your employment where maybe the HR manager didn't accommodate you properly or your supervisor terminated your job, in most cases like that, the individual who sort of carried out their usual job duties wouldn't be liable for the discrimination. You wouldn't name them as an individual respondent because they were just acting in the course of their duties, even though what happened might ultimately be discrimination. That would be the responsibility of the employer to address and remedy. The Human Rights Code protects us in these key areas of daily life. So the next thing you're asked on the complaint form is, where did the discrimination take place? So the code applies in the context of our employment, in the context of our access to accommodations, services, and facilities that are, quote, customarily available to the public. So anything that's sort of offered out to the public needs to be offered in a non-discriminatory way. We're protected from discrimination in our tenancies, in our membership in a trade union or an occupational association, our purchase of property, and we're also protected from discriminatory and hateful publications. Most complaints arise in the employment context. Well over half of all complaints are about discrimination on the job. Tenancy and access to services would be the next top three areas of discrimination. It is possible that more than one area of discrimination is at issue, and you can absolutely check off more than one box in this part of the complaint form. Just a little bit of context about those areas of protection. Employment includes seeing a discriminatory job ad. It includes discrimination during the interview process or in a hiring decision, on the job, the terms and conditions of your work, how you're paid, whether you get a promotion or not, accommodations for any disability that you might have, being terminated. All of these parts of the employment relationship are protected from discrimination. You shouldn't be treated in a discriminatory way in any of these parts of your job. And services and facilities includes a lot of different things. This is a big category of protection, and it includes things like businesses, restaurants, and stores, the services provided at a hospital or a medical clinic, transit services, services provided by schools and universities, the services provided by the police, services provided by stratas or governments, and the built environment is also considered a service or facility. So the design of sidewalks and curb cuts and crosswalks and other things need to be accessible and not create discriminatory barriers for people with disabilities. The next part of the complaint form is where you list what happened in terms of how were you discriminated against, which of your protected characteristics were at issue in the discrimination. So protected characteristics or prohibited grounds of discrimination are the parts of our identities of who we are that are protected from discrimination. And you can see the list there. You can also see towards the bottom how some of the protected characteristics only apply in certain areas. So for example, we're only protected from discrimination on the basis of our political beliefs in the context of our jobs. That protection doesn't apply in the context of access to services. The next thing that you have to do on the complaint form is describe what happened and share the details of the discrimination. And there's really no magic to this beyond telling the story in a clear and understandable way that really highlights what about your identity was treated badly. What was the negative thing that happened? What was the harm that happened? And how did that harm connect to one or more of your protected characteristics? So what did the respondent do and how did it impact you? And then really emphasizing, why was it discrimination? Because it's only discrimination when it connects to a protected characteristic. So telling the story in a chronological way, in my experience, is the clearest and most straightforward way to get the story out. You're not provided a ton of space on the print form for the tribunal, so feel free to attach additional pages. And I really like to suggest that people write the date or the approximate date. If you don't remember the exact date, you might just write in July of 2020 or last summer this happened, if you can't remember exactly when things happened. And do your best to sort of set out piece by piece, date by date, what happened and how it was discriminatory, why you believe this was a violation of your human rights. And again, be sure to emphasize three things: your protected characteristic that was targeted by the respondent, whether that was your sexual orientation or your religion or your race or color, the nature of the treatment and how it harmed you, and then how your protected characteristic was connected to that negative treatment that you experienced. After you tell your story, you'll be asked on the complaint form whether your complaint is filed in time. You must file your complaint within 1 year of the discrimination. It's a pretty strictly enforced timeline, and it can be quite difficult to get the tribunal to accept complaints that are filed later than a year after the event giving rise to the complaint. There are some situations, though, where the tribunal will accept older events, older allegations of discrimination. First is where there's a continuing contravention. So you can imagine a situation where you've been experiencing homophobic bullying at your job for years. It's been going on for a long time. And, something happened last week that was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. You can't handle it anymore and you're going to make a human rights complaint. Well, something happened within the last year, and then similar events of the same kind, all of those instances of homophobic bullying you experienced, those can also form part of the complaint because it's a continuing contravention, repeated acts of a similar character. You could also imagine a situation where there's an ongoing situation that continues to be discriminatory, like you have a disability and you can't access your apartment building because there's 10 steps up to the front door and your landlord won't install a ramp. So that's an ongoing situation that has potentially been discriminatory for a long time. Provided you've been impacted by that within the last year, you're able to bring that complaint forward. The tribunal also has some discretion to accept late filed complaints. So if it's not that late, or you have a really good reason for why it's late, and you can show that it's in the public interest to accept your complaint and it won't be unduly harmful or unfair to the other side to accept your complaint yet late, then the tribunal may use its discretion and accept your complaint even though you missed the 1-year time limit. But my strong suggestion is that you do your very, very best to get your complaint in before that 1-year limitation expires, because it can be difficult otherwise. The next part of the form asks whether there are any other proceedings going on related to the issues in your complaint. So sometimes people file human rights complaints while they also have an employment standards complaint going, or a grievance through their union, or something happening at the residential tenancy branch. So you tell the tribunal if there is another legal proceeding going on, and whether you want them to pause your human rights complaint while that other proceeding moves forward and resolves. There can be good reasons for maybe wanting to deal with something else first. And so you can ask the tribunal to just hold on to your complaint while another legal proceeding finishes up. And the next part of the complaint form asks what you're hoping to achieve through making this complaint. What do you want? What remedy are you seeking from the respondent? And this is a list of things that the tribunal can order after a hearing if your human rights complaint is successful. They can order the respondent to stop discriminating and not do it again. They can make a declaration that what happened was discriminatory. They can order the respondent to do things to try to avoid the discrimination happening again in the future, like get some training, education, develop a policy, those kinds of things. They can also order the respondent to compensate you for a variety of different things, including lost wages, other expenses that you incurred as a result of the discrimination. Maybe there were moving costs that you had to pay because you were evicted for a discriminatory reason. And the tribunal can also order the respondent to compensate you for what's called injury to dignity, feelings, and self-respect. And that's the sort of psychological impact of discrimination, the emotional harm that the discrimination caused. This isn't part of the complaint form, but it is something that I just wanted to highlight because I think it's important. The Human Rights Code protects people from retaliation if they make a complaint. It's a violation of the code to punish or evict or otherwise retaliate someone because they've made a human rights complaint, because they might make a human rights complaint, because they helped somebody else make a human rights complaint or acted as a witness. So sometimes it does happen and people can file an additional complaint about the retaliation if necessary. And so how does the process work? Well, if you filed a complaint with the tribunal tomorrow, you would probably wait several months for the tribunal to respond and tell you whether your complaint is accepted for filing. You see, that's quite a large window there that I've estimated, 1 to 6 months. The tribunal is quite busy these days, and it's taking quite a long time for this screening stage these days. So it may be a while before you hear from the tribunal, but eventually they will write to you and tell you that your complaint hopefully has been accepted for filing by the tribunal and is being sent to the respondents and put into the tribunal's process. Once the complaint is accepted, the tribunal will offer the parties a mediation. And you'll see on the complaint form, you have the opportunity to indicate whether you're interested in mediation or not. Many complaints get resolved through mediation, and the tribunal will provide a mediator, and they'll organize a date. You can even do it on video conference these days, or maybe by phone. Eventually we'll be able to do them in person again. And you can usually get these mediations relatively quickly, within about 3 to 6 months, and try to resolve the complaint more quickly and collaboratively, cooperatively with the other side, and come up with a resolution together that's going to work for you. However, not every complaint resolves through mediation. And so if there's no settlement, no resolution, then the process moves forward. The respondent has to file a response. the complainant and the respondent both have to do their disclosure. So they have to exchange documents. Anything relevant to the complaint has to be provided to the other side. Sometimes respondents make a preliminary application to dismiss the complaint, and they might get the complaint dismissed without a hearing if they can persuade the tribunal that it doesn't have a reasonable prospect of success. But if there's no application to dismiss, or if it's not successful, then a hearing gets scheduled and conducted, and then a decision is issued. And those decisions and the hearings generally are public, and the decisions get published on the tribunal's website and also on a legal database called CanLE. Here are a few resources for human rights legal help. I've taken the liberty of putting our human rights clinic at the top because it is the main thing that we do, but there are a number of other organizations that may be able to provide some assistance, including, of course, our friends here at AC Friends of the Court, that can help with the complaint drafting and filling out the form. As I've also noted, the 3 law schools and the services they provide, as well as a few other resources. So you may want to look them up and see if you can get some additional help with your complaint.